Everybody for coming. My name's Vít Bohal, and I'd like to welcome you to the International Colloquium, which will be featuring some wonderful theorists, philosophers, art critics, and so on. It's called Creativity and a Cybernetic Concept of Culture. So I will quickly read, and all this information is available online, but I will quickly read the abstract, or rather the general overview of what we will be talking about in the next hour. And in fact, tomorrow there will be a second panel, which will be addressing some similar topics. So without further ado, we can say that more than 70 years after Norbert Wiener's original framing of the term cybernetics, the overlap between living systems and technology has become ubiquitous. Issues of technological saturation, infrastructural and ecological resilience, and universality have become fundamental for thinking technology from the 1990s onwards. Today, the concrete existence of automated landscapes, smart cities, and vast wireless internet coverage have constituted a new ground for the figure of culture. What role can art and theory play in the formulation of that space? Is one of the questions we will be addressing. How can it problematize the construction of a robust technical semiotics, and how to properly interrogate the connection between cybernetics and culture? So today it's my pleasure to welcome our three invited guests. From the left, Lukáš Prokop, Noemi Purkrábková, and Lenka Veselá, whom I will be introducing in the next few minutes, and I think you can see the bio right there. I'd also like to draw your attention to the wall, which I think might illustrate, in a way, some of the things we might be talking about. It's a project by Object Paradise, and it basically is Sandra Paslavská used certain applications, online applications, which use GANs and neural nets to actually have an AI create solidarity according to certain art styles, which she chose as part of the prompt, which, as everyone who's seen DALL-E Mini, I guess, knows, the more detailed they are, the higher quality they have. So I find that it's a nice little segue into the theory which we'll be addressing just now. And without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to our first guest, who is Noemi Purkrábková. She is a media theorist, art writer, curator, DJ, and co-founder of the amorphous audiovisual collective BCAA System. She's an editor of Art and Antiques magazine and a contributor to a number of others, as well as a PhD candidate at the Film Studies Department of the Faculty of Arts at Charles University in Prague, where she deals primarily with productive poetics of digital fiction and ontogenetic qualities of contemporary moving image. So please welcome Noemi Purkrábková.
Does it work? Really? I'm speaking close enough. Okay, well, this may be a little too much. Right now? Yeah, okay. Well, first maybe I would like to say that both of my colleagues here are going to be talking, I think, primarily also about their own work. In this respect, I'm in a little bit of a weirder position because I'm more of a theorist, so I chose to talk about the work of somebody else. But I will try to draw some points that I hold important based on it. The work at hand is the work of artist Wang Shui, which I find particularly important for demonstrating certain qualities of contemporary digital images and our interaction with and also within them, as they are broadly observable not only in contemporary art, but also in visual culture in general. So using this work as sort of a background layer, I would like to point out three overlapping points that I consider important, especially with the recent popular advent of artificial intelligence, imaging and imagining, as Vít spoke about it already, through the ever more accessible and effective machine learning models based on the principle of generative adversarial networks. So the first point considers the embodied materiality of digital images and their what, as we might call it, metabolic nature. As many other contemporary artists, Wang Shui effortlessly crosses the supposed borderline between the digital space of the screen and the physical matter of human bodies. This doesn't simply mean acknowledging that our interactions with technologies shape us intimately, which is a theme that becomes more and more visible in fine art today, as demonstrated, for example, also by the two recent big exhibitions in the National Gallery curated by Michal Novotný. But Wang Shui approaches this process in a more literal way, trying to, for example, give sculpturally shape to, I'm quoting, the latent space between pixels, or to incorporate AI into such seemingly analog artistic activities as painting. Can we turn the slide? Yeah. So, but it is important to emphasize that this embodiment is not about simply printing on a canvas what was generated by Diffusion B, Midjourney, DALL-E, or any other program, but about treating the process of the virtual and physical interaction as always a multifaceted one, which means merging the analog and the digital tools at several stages in the process. In Wang Shui's paintings, their sketches are already influenced by AI, but then they are manually put on the metal canvas, which is then, through the light projection, again influenced by the AI imaginations, and then painted on again, and so on. So the physicality in this case doesn't point only to the heavy materiality or ecological impact of such digital technologies, but becomes, in a sense, truly metabolic, which is a term used by theorist Shane Denson to underline the fact that digital machine-generated images enter our perception and cognition without needing our consent, same as algorithms already modulate our emotions and tastes on every platform we use. This is why Wang Shui, for example, calls their works post-human tissue sample, or why they talk about the desire to be devoured and transmuted by the digital, or even directly digested by it, using, and I'm quoting, screens as windows or portals into the meta-gut. So, furthermore, they emphasize this embodied and visceral reality of the digital, also by feeding the data sets, for example, with images of cancerous cells and so on, which then takes the idea of genetic and evolutionary mutation on yet another level. And this, another slide, please. The second point I would want to make is about the collaboration with technical tools itself. I would say very often, of course, artists nowadays are treating software as a way to bring forth their own specific artistic vision, as it could be seen in many, for example, 3D sculpting programs, where, I don't know, even there we can, though, talk about certain level of, or like degree of non-human imaginary that is probably brought in by the tool itself. On the other hand, there's been many claims about machinic creativity recently, connected, of course, to the discussions about all these like AI-generated images, and I don't know, also discussions about whether AI-generated artworks can enter art competitions and whether they can still be considered authored by the artists who brought them in, and so on. But the problem here is precisely in overcoming this dichotomy of the master and the tool, as well as the idea of creativity residing either here or there. So instead, I think Wang Shui nicely demonstrates that the artistic process could be treated as sort of a slowly growing shared tissue, really, as they were really like using exactly this term, of the human and the technical. In such an understanding, it is rendered irrelevant what comes from human intention and what truly originates or doesn't originate in the AI algorithm, because the process itself is rather a small-scale model of the evolutionary mutual becoming of the machinic and the human through an ongoing exchange of gestures, notes, images, and memories, something that we are already plunged into nowadays, often without being even aware of it. So what we need to be solving on the large scale regarding the content of datasets we feed into commonly used AI is thus made visible here on an intimate level, I would say, when Wang Shui talks about the datasets as being sort of a journal for them, as is also written in the quote from them that's on the screen. It is a sort of Stiglerian exteriorized memory, or like a set of memories and thoughts that evolve gradually through the technical imagination, causing for the human and the machinic to sort of meld into each other beyond distinction. We can perhaps recall in this respect, for example, how Yug Hui, who's really at the core of a lot of other questions raised by this colloquium, voices out that we need to pay attention to the shifting of imagination from subject to algorithm, or Luciana Parisi's claim that software programs became sort of evolutionary bodies themselves. Because if we connect the collaborative process to the embodied reality of techniques, we really are constructing a shared biotechnological infrastructure. And the last aspect I wanted to talk about concerns the relationship to space and time that some of these images produce. Another slide, please. In the project for this year's Whitney Biennial, Wang Shui used algorithms to react to their installation plus to the CO2 levels of the gallery visitors, emitted by the gallery visitors. The visual output was then generated real time and always, and was of course always different based on the specific configuration of the people in the room. Another slide, if we can, please. Yeah, as is like if you want to dive deeper in the description, you can read it on the screen. I'm not gonna do it. It would be too long. But this interactive relationship to time, and maybe if you can play the video, because that's the should be able to just play it because it's actually a video. Oh, it's playing. Nice. So this interactive relationship to time could perhaps bring certain memories of video artists' closed-circuit installations, for example. But images such as these are actually very different. First, as many other digital images, they precisely as images don't originate in any pre-existing real space. It is not about capturing and delaying or changing any sort of visual input. Instead, they generate in real time something entirely new, and from the visual point of view, unprecedented and fictional. And they thus relate differently to both space and time than we are used to from perceiving most audiovisual production, however post-produced or transformed. This real-time generative quality of algorithms becomes ever more prevalent in contemporary visual culture, and its real-timeness is not anymore the real time of television broadcast, but real time of something that doesn't exist anywhere as observable by human eyes. Even in cinema, which was historically so tied to the concepts of memory and testimony, the non-existent backgrounds are now becoming generated on LED screens as the protagonists walk while shooting. So I would want to conclude with the thought that this calls for a renewed understanding of images, moving or otherwise, in art and outside of it, as the whole history of viewing images through the paradigm of memory or even real-time evidence is insufficient in front of these types of image production. The new tools that shape us thus require new theoretical tools and concepts in order for us to enter this co-evolutionary process with at least a little more self-consciousness. I think that artists such as Wang Shui understand this, and art is in general a great space to explore this interaction. But it is important to also note that this discussion can't be limited to art only, as it presents a great concern to our cognitive and imaginative capacities in general. I think it's no coincidence that the Midjourney website states that they offer, I'm quoting, new mediums of thought, and another quote, expand the imaginative powers of the human species. But I think that with phrases like these, we always have to ask towards what this expansion is directed, which makes it irreducibly a social issue and, importantly, also a political one.
you very much, Noemi. I should have made it clear that it'd be great if, of course, we could sort of get a conversation going in the latter half of this of our program. And if anybody has any questions for Noemi, unless they're absolutely pressing, let's leave it for after the presentations of our other two guests. I will introduce our second guest, who is Lukáš Prokop, who is currently studying a master's program at the FFA of FaVU in Brno, in the video studio. Abstraction, complexity, and experimentation are of key importance in the thematical infrastructure of his work, materialized through labyrinthine 3D modeling processes, digital image manipulation, and post-processing. Lukáš Prokop, he came from Brno today, so thank you very much, as did Lenka. And Lukáš, take it away, please.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, of course. And okay, I'm gonna present a surprisingly still ongoing project of like 3+ years, which had 2 past exhibitions in Brno in Galerie Mladých, and that's not the presentation. Yeah. In Galerie Mladých, in Zázrak Dorných, and one project I'm currently working on for Psí Víno website. So to sum up, should I wait? For it's a video. It should be a video. All right. Yeah. Okay. So, like the main thing I'm interested in this project is really just a creation of a world, like world building is the correct term, and I'm trying to approach a world in the fictional world that I'm creating as not just like a backdrop or a backbone of some sort of like a fictional narrative or I don't know gameplay, but as like a an experience which like very alien and very like non-human experience that you can just still access with human thought, and to accomplish something like this, to make a world like this believable and in any way, I decided, these are frames from the exhibitions, I decided to create the world like as much as bottom up as I really could. It's basically bootstrapping the world like into existence, and it's something I got from Mark J.P. Wolf, I think, and it's called like a 4th degree of subcreation, which is basically creating this world not as like its difference is not in some like geographical or historical or any like cultural way, but I basically try to recreate like some sort of like physical rules, and it's like very like conditions of existence, and for that I chose this very this specific one point from which everything okay, from which the whole thing happened, from which like the whole world sprouted out, and there was this like frequency, this hum or like this infrasensory oscillation, which was really the like the not just like a biorhythm of the world that I wanted to create, but I decided to kind of somehow merge it with my own workflow on the world. So I decided to just put on this very iterative iterative workflow, iterative way of creating the whole thing, and it became for me this like doubling and somehow like copying these elements into the main core of what I wanted to create, was like creating this like shared space, shared system of not just the world or the fictional world I was trying to create, or the like the computational processes that worked, but also for me as an author, I was kind of forced to follow a specific rule set that I set out with, and it for me it created this like a superset of like this virtual space that was not just digital virtual space. It was something that all the parts of the project shared, like including the fictional world, including me, including everything, and I wanted to include the viewer into it as well. It's really this like I'm gonna use something Amy Ireland talked about. She calls a rhythm, as you know, just maybe can we just scroll to like half of it? Yeah, it's all right. Yeah, whatever. Amy Ireland. She talks about rhythm as of this like space-time, which it's not just like this chronological undulation, but really like some condition for experience, really, and that's what I was trying to somehow create with this like crazy like almost like forcing myself and all of the parts into these rules, and so like this space-time that I worked on became like the main character of the whole work, and it felt to me like more like an exploration of something. All of a sudden I didn't feel like I was really the most creative aspect in the work, but that there were like many chains of smaller or just like modular creative acts, and that was like I had really a lot of fun creating this. I heard the viewers did not have so much fun at the first exhibition because it was too claustrophobic for some. But that brings me to here are the pictures of from the world. Really, I created this very like complex, self-similar fractal morphology to. But it's basically created from these like procedural algorithmic noises, which are very uniform in how they look, and I only could I felt just like an explorer. There wasn't much for me to do with them, and so like I worked with this like weird iterative. Like oscillating approach where I like modified them somehow, and then like created like an airflow simulation to see how it works, and then worked from there, and it were these like cycles of torture, and but this is something I don't want to call it. That I was trying to like control something. I feel it's more like a choreography of just multiple parts and if it's my work or like the computer processing something, or as I wanted the viewer to just to follow some not really rules, but some like given like there some sort of an intuition that I wanted to put into it. And like I don't know, as you can see here, there's like a very clear like spiral that you should read the diagram in, or the installation was always based on the specific morphology, the specific geometry that I created, or I don't know, the soundtrack or a composition of the prints that were there. And yeah, it's really like guidance across like guidance across scales and different rhythms, really. Yeah. Yeah, that's all from me, I guess. Thanks. There you go.
Thanks very much, Lukáš. I'm really looking forward to the question and answer session, which will be following, because I know I have some. Do you? Our last speaker is Lenka Veselá, who is a PhD researcher at the Department of Theory and History of Art at the Faculty of Fine Arts in Brno, Czech Republic. Her art-based research practice concerns synthetic bodies, meaning bodies emerging by synthesis, and synthetic bodies of knowledges, meaning knowledges synthesized across multiple sites. She's an initiator of a collective publication and exhibition project called Synthetic Becoming, and I think she will be presenting part of that project. So, Lenka Veselá.
Hi, yeah. So, hi, my research actually concerns biotechnologies. Hi. So my research actually concerns biotechnologies and technologically or biochemically transformed environments. So I feel maybe a bit infiltrating the panel from a slightly different position, as I am indeed not an expert on digital or cyber technologies, but I will try to make myself useful here in the sense that any technology is always already enfleshed in plastic, metal, rare earth minerals and other materials which need to be extracted, mined and synthesized for the making of digital devices, and which have usually like really long and rich afterlives in the environment after those devices are dismissed and discarded as no longer useful or desirable. So I will start by introducing the collective monograph, Synthetic Becoming, that I helped to bring to life. And then I will say something about how the book uses the figuration of synthetic becoming to conceptualize chemical exposures, and how that figuration may be helpful, perhaps, also for thinking about our being with and making with technologies that do not involve primarily or intentionally biochemical action. So the book is a collective monograph titled Synthetic Becoming. It is about to be published soon in early December by the Faculty of Fine Arts in Brno and a Berlin-based publisher KREAS, specializing in publishing books at the intersection of arts, humanities and social sciences. So Synthetic Becoming brings together research by artists, activists and feminist technoscience practitioners concerned with synpoetic becoming, with synthetic hormones and hormonally active chemicals. The book examines effects of industrial, pharmaceutical and modern human production and interplay of hormonally active molecules, asking what does life reassembled by synthetic substances look and feel like? Who are we becoming with them, and how can we possibly be with them otherwise? So adopting a decolonial feminist approach and embracing queer ecological sensibilities, the book responds with a series of critical but hopeful provocations that embrace post-human mutability and articulate our synthetic becoming in ways that facilitate caring relations and allow us to envision and therefore enact hopeful futures with and despite these peculiar chemical agents. So in the introduction to the book, which I wrote with the help of the collective, I pay attention to the different meanings of the term synthetic and how those different meanings can help us grasp the many different ways in which synthetic chemicals affect our lives. And I would like to share some of those insights and look at how they may be helpful for thinking about our becoming with digital technologies. So the word synthetic comes from the ancient Greek synthetikos, meaning relating to or involving synthesis. Synthesis is a composed word combining syn, meaning together with, along with, or jointly, and titanai, meaning to put, to place. So in accord with this original meaning, synthetic things are things composed of multiple parts, combining these parts to form a new connected whole. Synthetic things involve composing, combining, joining, and togetherness. And the guiding or grounding idea of the book is actually that we are synthetic. And the claim of the book is that nothing in this world is a standalone thing, and that we are not autonomous individuals divorced from the broader collectivity of human and non-human life that exists in a shared environment, but composite entities, mixtures in which the stuff of the world comes together to form what we understand to be ourselves. So the stuff of the world that the book addresses ranges from chemicals synthesized in and released from endocrine cells of animals, including humans, synthesized within the bodies of plants and fungi, or in laboratories and at industrial sites. And the book investigates combined and interactive effects of biochemically active molecules produced across all these sites, and how these effects are bound with conditions and relations in which they occur. So it is through the scientific, social, and cultural practices, the book argues, that we understand some of the hormonal molecules as either natural or synthetic, or either good medicines or bad endocrine disruptors. And in this, I think, can be useful lens also to look at digital technologies, to think about how the scientific, social, and cultural practices shape our understanding of what technology is in the first place, and where it begins and where it ends, also in relation to human and non-human bodies, and how the assemblages of the natural and organic and the synthetic, artificial, or technological are formed. So with the notion of the synthetic, the book, of course, also points not only to the compositional nature of things, but it simultaneously refers to the processes of biochemical and chemical synthesis, by which its objects of concern emerge. In chemistry, synthesis has a specific meaning, referring to the assembling and production of chemicals. Chemical synthesis is the creation of chemical compounds by reaction from simpler materials, sort of like a complicated undertaking involving human actors, chemical agents, reactions, catalysts, protocols, and methods by which new, more complex molecules are constructed. So in this sense, the book understands the synthetic as a concept that cuts across scales as it ties together the molecular with bodies and body politics, but also global economies and environmental concerns. Synthetic becoming shifts our attention to our non-innocent chemical relations and at times traumatic and harmful, even deadly entanglements with them. So studying chemicals necessitates our engagement with issues of consent, complicity, and violence attached to the consumerism and extractivism implicit in their production, use, and disposal. as there is like really no way out. The ubiquity of anthropogenic chemicals leaves us with no option but to live our lives with and against them. And the aim of the book is to facilitate this like process of learning to live well in a world that also includes these chemicals. Again, the ways in which digital media and networks act on our lives and bodies involve different mechanisms of action, but the need to confront the issues of consent, complicity, consumerism, and extractive and uncaring relations applies to them nevertheless. So furthermore, the book also emphasizes that the effects of technologies are not pre-established givens, but relational. And here, I think, besides the issue of uneven access to technologies that applies to all technologies, the distinction between voluntary experimentation and involuntary exposure is of particular importance and very much relevant when it comes to digital technologies as well. As in the case of environmental chemicals, we are exposed to digital media, ubiquitous in everyday environments, chronically, and often involuntarily without our truly voluntary and informed consent. So this may be a question for our discussion later, when exposure to digital media can be said to constitute the grounds for violence, and how would such violence compare to hidden, slow-moving and emergent realities of chemical violence, the violence of chemical exposures? What would be like the different temporality of it? Additionally, the figuration of synthetic becoming emphasizes that we are not synthetic, not only synthetic, but also constantly being synthesized, marking the open-endedness of our synthetic nature, sort of like the incessant emergence and re-emergence through the processes of synthesis. So significantly, in this respect, synthesis is linked to complexity. It is an undertaking whereby simpler elements come together and interact with each other, giving rise to higher order of emergence, greater than a mere sum of its parts. And with the notion of becoming, the book underscores this link between synthesis and complexity, characterizing the action of components interacting in multiple situated ways, yielding non-linearity, randomness, collective dynamics, and emergence. At the same time, following material feminist, new materialist, and post-humanist lines of thought, the book understands becoming to be a counter-causal process. Becoming, particularly as discussed by feminist theorist Karen Barat, signifies the mutual co-constitution of entangled material and social phenomena coming into being out of different possibilities occurring at each moment. And it follows that cause and effect, as well as other distinctions such as nature and culture or natural and technological, do not exhibit clear boundaries, but only become determinate and meaningful in the dynamic and open-ended process of becoming. So becoming, I believe, is a particularly helpful concept to grasp the indeterminacy of how substances unfold performatively and relationally beyond the dualisms of natural and synthetic, pure and polluted, or healthy and damaged, and can be of use in considering the effects of digital technologies as well, to examine how they unfold and emerge relationally and differentially, to explore the digital landscapes as sites of indeterminacy and becoming, and to interrogate the possibilities of digital kinships. Kinships in the sense that synthetic becoming is, to a large extent, synonymous with symbiosis, like living together or co-emerging and coexisting. So, yeah, digital kinships, that's my entry point for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lenka, for a wonderful presentation. And I will just jump in straight away. And I'm wondering whether you could maybe talk a bit more about how to navigate this this kind of distinction between beneficiality and toxicity, because I think a lot of the talk which we've been hearing and maybe which we can be having, is about sort of takes into account a certain collapse of boundaries. Yet at the same time, if we're talking about chemical pollution, which potentially can have long-term impacts, it seems to be in everyone's best interest in a way take into account the toxicity which might be kind of there. And I'm wondering whether some of the essays in the book somehow address that. This pharmacon can be both beneficial and toxic, but at the same time I see the need to collapse these two boundaries in a much more complex sort of framework. And I'm wondering whether you could kind of speak on that. This, where does a beneficial thing become toxic, and when and why?
Okay, so I haven't mentioned it in my talk, but those endocrine disruptors, as they are narrated in scientific discourse, like the greatest attention is not, given to cancers and other sort of neurological and, there's a lot of what they do, but it is they're conceptualized through sexual and reproductive anomalies, which might be problematic from the queer perspective, like literally to the point where queerness is conceptualized as an effect of pollution. So we are trying to find different ways how to talk about the violence without sort of reproducing those, heteronormative and transphobic narratives. And we are doing this through this notion of indeterminacy that is really important, because it doesn't make this link between cause and effects, like a cause endocrine disruptors and a bad effect. And there's also space for, resilience and what we are following scholars Angeliki Balayanis and Emma Garnett called chemical kinship, like making good relations with a bad kin, like with chemicals. So, but the most important perhaps is this distinction between a voluntary experimentation as opposed to involuntary exposure. So thinking about the structural and relations rather than cause and effect and damage.
Thanks very much for the answer. I think it ties into the overall theme of this of our colloquium, which, as I said before, this is the first panel, and we're looking forward to second panel, which will actually feature the same thinkers, plus Louis Armand and Václav Jánošík. And if you look at the abstract, we talk about kind of techno-diversity and this notion which Yukhui, whom Noemi has already mentioned, sort of came with, that we tend to regard technology as being kind of deterministic, or to be in a way, driven by certain forces which are ubiquitous and immutable. But technodiversity sort of comes in and says that no, there are other ways of addressing technology and using technology. And I find it really interesting in the context of what Lenka just said, that basically it was not accepting but choosing to experiment or not to. And I'm wondering whether we could kind of jump in perhaps with Noemi and talk about this techno-diversity. I'm wondering, you as an artist, not only a theorist, you have extensive knowledge of various software, various programs, and I'm wondering to which degree you regard them to be, techno-diverse, and to which degree your tools, in a way, allow for a techno-diversity, or to what degree they might be, in fact, closed and limited to your purposes.
Should I try this one?
Yeah.
Sorry. Yeah. First, maybe I should mention, I'm part of a collective that's using all of these things, but at the same time, the collective work is always a little diversified, and I myself am not really good at maneuvering them. So, but I mean, I am in the process usually, and I see how it works, and also we together talk about how we even want to approach them, and in general, I think it's the problem, or it's exactly this like pharmacological logic that you were talking about already, because very often we use software that is commonly accessible, but also, of course, it is being used for various highly commercial purposes, such as, I don't know, Unity, like a game design engines and stuff like that. So I don't know, like there's always this like tendency towards like unification, and to like, which at the same time can be a good thing, which makes, I don't know, like it makes the creative process easier for people, but then at the same time it always like has in itself this risk of unification, which I think is a typical thing in and it's also at the core of this like movement between unification and technodiversity. But I think we usually try to use these technologies a little subversively and try to, and I think it's also an ethical viewpoint that's important in this, since I was talking that much about the idea of collaborating with the tools instead of just like using them in this like Heideggerian Zuhandenheit like logic. I think that's something that we actually want to and usually try to make part of the process as well, like just talking about how we want to see some sort of like randomness, or how we want to give more space to what's going to come out of it. But then at the same time, it's also just about, and that might sound a little like post-human idealist, like maybe even like a little stupid, but but I don't know, like it's in a way also cute. So you just can try to think about very basic things that you do with the tools, even on like a physical level, just on some sort of more like, I don't know, like a friendly and more affirmative way somehow. Like a really like, I don't know, understanding them not as something that just is like a cold piece of tag that you're approaching, but maybe trying to think of them as having some sort of soul or agency. I don't know.
No, thanks very much. Is there a program you ever found to be toxic to your modus operandi?
That's a hard question for me, since I'm not directly operating it usually. I would need to ask the boys who usually do it. That sounded super gendered. That's not this. It's just funny because I'm the only female in the collective, so I colloquially usually just say I have to talk with the boys, and it just sounded really bad in this context. But it's not that like gendered as it seems.
And I would just like to mention that there are these two books available. BCAA, the collective, did the covers, and in fact, Noemi has a text in this white one, so they are available at the bookshop. And I have a question for Lukáš, which is very, in a way, similar. You also, being an artist, working sort of transmedially, in what way does the technodiversity of your tool come into play?
Lately a lot. I feel like I've recently switched the main software that I use for the 3D stuff, which is like the main element or the main creative like medium for me, and it's an open source software, so there's a lot of stuff that I can just easily plug into it and just play with and really experiment, which was not which I feel like is not that possible with like with many of the commercial programs or programs that are not like entirely like focused on experimentation, like I don't know, like I can't say the names of the programs. I use Blender right now, and I used to use something called Cinema 4D, and it's very focused on like motion design and this kind of stuff. And anything that comes out of it, if you don't put absurd amounts of time into it, just tends to be a bit I don't know. It seems like a commercial or something, and that's. But of course, there's the same thing with the stuff that I use now. It's used for I don't know, short animated films and I don't know, a lot of porn, I guess. And there's this like, I feel that just switching to something open source, something I don't have to, invest like $2,000 into just to be able to experiment is very helpful in that regard.
Absolutely. I'd like to ask whether anybody has a question. Any questions from the floor? Yes, please. Maybe. Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, hi. Is that okay? Yeah. Thank you for 3 excellent talks there. I do a bit of work in my day job teaching animation. And so I've explored a little bit with kind of algorithmy things. And I find that like algorithmic art and AI art and things, they're really good at creating like exciting new textures. Sort of, you can get these amazing stuff coming out that's like otherworldly. The thing that I find that they really don't understand is like composition, like the traditional art of composition. And I wondered if you'd thought much about like why that is. Why do they always seem to just be more texture driven?
Who's it for?
Okay.
It is a question for the panel. Does anybody feel? Yeah.
Okay. From my or in my view, I think it's got to do with the training set really, because it's based on thousands, hundreds of thousands of images, and when it creates some sort of composition, it's mostly gonna be related to the data set or to the input data. So for example, if you want to output like some sort of like modernist architecture or just like super like hi-fi building, it's gonna be like the classic like central composition and some cool high fidelity stuff. And I think it's just like as simple as that. It's not simple at all, but I also really like the textures that come out of it, and I use that a lot. But yeah.
Yeah, I would maybe just add that I think it also depends on the level of what you're working with, because a lot of these I think do it. But then, for example, if you have some paid versions, or for example, and that's another thing, there is even like open source programs that actually allow you to, for example, zoom into you have the original image that you, or like the first image that you generate, original, problematic, and then you can actually work with it further and, for example, add things into right upper corner and stuff like that, and it actually can work all the way. So I don't know, I think that also is I think the field is bigger, and the possibilities are also broader than this. But yeah, and maybe also one more thing that got me while talking about this, and also connects to the technodiversity issue, especially concerning these sort of softwares. They are technically not softwares very often, but yeah, I don't know. We really need to talk about first, as I was mentioning in the talk, what the data sets consist of, but then also it's, as always, and Lukáš was mentioning this, it's a big question of if it's open source or not, and who actually gets, because it's it is machine learning, and it really depends on who actually is teaching them and what they are teaching them. So I don't know, for example, the Midjourney is kind of limited. I don't know, there was one of the more elaborate ones and more functional ones, but it's also the financial, you have to pay very soon for intervening in it more. Whereas, I don't know, for example, the diffusion beat, that's a thing that was released not really, I don't know, it's a few weeks. And it actually has been open source the entire way. And it, on Reddit, there is I don't want to say a stupid number, so I will not say any number, but there's a lot of threads of people just sharing and remaking the infrastructure of the algorithm itself. So I don't know, it's an important question how they are being evolved and who has the access to evolve them towards what.
Okay. Okay. Unfortunately, we are out of time. We do not have time for any more questions. But there is always tomorrow, because panel 2 will happen at 8 o'clock, featuring our wonderful panelists, whom I would like you to give a big round of applause for. We have Lenka Veselá, Noemi Purkrábková, and Lukáš Prokop. And we will see each other tomorrow for more discussion. Thank you very much. Now we have Dim Locator coming on.